We got one more question for you here from Ken. He said your pre-70 dating of the Gospels is based primarily on the lack of mention of certain key events like the destruction of Jerusalem or the death of Paul. Can we not use the same reasoning you employ for dating Acts early to argue that Mark knew nothing of Jesus' resurrection appearances to his disciples, since Mark doesn't make any mention of them in his gospel, apart from the spurious ending of chapter 16?
Well, it's kind of related to the question we just asked. The question is, why was really the broader question is, why is something either included or missing? I do agree that Mark is the earliest gospel, and it's no surprise that it's also the shortest gospel. The question then becomes, well, why would Mark's gospel be shorter than the rest? Well, it also, if you look at it, has the most kind of emotion words in it and the most kind of action words in it. So there's something about Mark that reflects a sense of action and urgency. That's been, even skeptical scholars will kind of at least admit that. Now, I think you might also, though, since it's first, and it's a sense of urgency and action and emotion, and it's charged in a way that the other Gospels aren't charged. It seems like it's the Gospel that says, hey, it's a do this Gospel. And I see this all the time in when crimes occur, that the closer to the actual crime, the narrative of the crime is always more urgent. We give a broadcast. We broadcast a quick first broadcast is just to get the data out to people. Why? Because we think we might catch these bad guys. So right away, the first account on the radio is going to be, I have a murder here, last seen two white male suspects wearing a red jacket running eastbound on Hawthorne. Okay, fine. So now we've got a rough location, what the crime is, got a rough description of the suspects and their last direction of travel. There's a lot more that officer could have said, but he's only saying enough to get officers who are in the area to be active in looking for the suspect. Now, as time goes by, the final report of this is going to be as in-depth as possible because they've already been caught. I think it's clear from Scripture that the authors of Scripture believed, for whatever reason, that Jesus would return very soon, within their lifetimes, perhaps. And so a lot of what's left out of the earliest accounts, Mark's account particularly, it's a crime broadcast. It's like, hey, we need to act now. Jesus is coming back. You guys need to know the data. And so it's a very brief, very charged for action, very emotionally charged gospel. I think that's another way to read that gospel that is every bit as fair. As we get into Matthew or into Luke, we get much more detailed accounts because now you've got Luke traveling with Paul. The ascension's already occurred, and we're much further along in the timeline than I think we were with Mark. I think there's a sense of urgency in Mark's gospel. And think about it, this is written early, and there's a sense of urgency. The eyewitnesses to the resurrection are still available to the first hearers, to the first writers of these Gospels. Those eyewitnesses are still alive. And so there's a sense in which as we move further and further away from the actual resurrection, that the accounts become more detailed, that it can be explained in a number of ways. If you think it can be explained by just late additions, of course it could. Of course, but is that the most reasonable way to explain it? And that's where I think we would disagree.
Thanks so much for watching our video. If it was helpful and useful to you, I'd really appreciate it if you would follow us, subscribe to our channel at the bottom link here in the video, and tell your friends. And please follow us on social media.